human consciousness in the book Science and Philosophy, didn't we? We read the whole thing about that particular mind, didn't we? But we haven't finished in mind in Tibetan Buddhism. We finished doubt. Um, yes, and we have a little bit left in mind in Tibetan Buddhism, but I won't read everything. I think the inferential cognizer is much more important. Um, One thing that I thought to emphasize again, and I think I already went through it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think on page 92, I think I have mentioned that when we speak about the three stages of hearing, reflecting, and meditating, then when we talk about hearing, we like the activity of hearing gives rise to what is called the wisdom that has arisen from hearing. So a kind of wisdom, a kind of understanding that is the result of hearing. And that kind of wisdom is a correctly assuming consciousness. So on the basis of studying, on the basis of listening to teachings, which is, well, hearing here is basically another word for studying. As a result of our study, what we should or the result, yeah, as a result of listening to a class, for instance, we should develop a wisdom arisen from hearing, which refers to correct assumption with regard to whatever content we've studied. So if it's about the impermanence of sound, we should have correct assumption, or we should correctly assume that sound is impermanent. That would be the wisdom arisen from hearing. The wisdom arisen from reflection should be inference or inferential cognition. Okay, so that's what it says on page 92 and 93. Unless, of course, from hearing you generate a wrong understanding. Of course, then if you're convinced that sound is permanent, that would, of course, not be the wisdom arisen from hearing. Lati Rinpoche explains, but yeah, I guess that's pretty clear. Um, yes. So, what else does it say? Yeah. So on page 93. Rinpoche emphasizes again that such a knower is described, and well, such a knower should be one-pointedly, such a mind, such a correct assumption should be one-pointedly as opposed to wavering or vacillating between different options, or decisively as an alternative term. So determine or conceive its object in a decisive fashion, its main object, so a phenomenon which is its main object. In the case of sound being impermanent, yes. So, um, yes, and oops, sorry. The usual struggle with the camera. I didn't spit on it this time. Usually I try to stick it with spit. Okay. All right. Let's hope it stays. Can you see me?
Yes, yes, we do.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so superimpositions have not been eliminated. In other words, the mind doesn't realize its object. So I think it's a beautiful way to say superimpositions have not been eliminated in the sense that the opposite has not been eliminated by the mind, which means if you realize that sound is impermanent, you automatically eliminate the possibility of the superimposition that sound is permanent. Like, no way would you have that wrong view unless you forget that you've realized the object. That's also mentioned somewhere. Then there are a few other definitions. I don't think I need to go through them. Just to briefly mention, it mentions experience. Uh, there's one definition Lati Rinpoche disagrees with, saying um, that correct assumption can arise without depending on experience. And Lati Rinpoche disagrees. Of course, it could also be independence on experience that we correctly assume something. But in that context, he explains on page 94 the three types of experience. Now, in the West, I guess how we use the word experience, it might be slightly different. Like, I gained some new experience. I did this, I did something else. Now I know how to do it, so I have some new experience. But it's rather about, well, direct perception in the case of the sense consciousnesses, the self-knower or the reflective and a reflexive awareness, or that which has arisen from meditation. Now, usually in the Buddhist context, we talk a lot about gaining an experience of something, which means experience of emptiness, experience of selflessness, of impermanence, and so forth. In that case, referring to a yogic direct perception. Okay. So those are the types of experience that he mentions. Uh, yeah, so, whoops. Wait, I'll have to use spit. That is such a funny camera. Okay. Hmm. All right. Let's see. Yeah, just trying to think. I marked a few things, but there's nothing really that important. It mentions the different types of correct assumption, which in science and philosophy, it's actually explained more extensively. Um, Oh yeah. Then let's go to page 99. I don't think, again, I think everything that's in here is pretty straightforward, unless you have a question. If you read this on your own, I mean, it'd be a good idea. I don't know whether you had time to read it, but it's a good idea to read it. And then if you have a question, to ask in class or maybe ask one of your classmates, because it's really helpful to have this book. I mean, parts of what we go through, you'll probably forget. And so later on, well, so sorry. Don't know what's happening today. Okay. All right. That should work. Make myself a little small. Okay. Um, yeah, so if you have any questions, you're always welcome to ask, but let's look at page 99, which is the last passage before the text explains another type of mind. It mentions consciousnesses such as the meditative stabilization on ugliness. Uh, Focusing on the ugly aspect of something. If we have attachment towards, let's say, a person we feel attracted to, then we should focus also on the ugliness. That doesn't mean they're ugly, of course, but basically on some negative aspects. So ugliness or kind of negative aspects of that particular object of attachment. Then there's great compassion or bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. Now, those minds are none of the seven cognitions. They're none of the seven types of mind. These types of mind arise by the power of meditation being generated through the force of long practice and familiarization. The thing is here, it's not a subsequent cognition because none of these minds realize their objects. If they realize their objects, so in the case of familiarizing ourselves um, with a particular object, that's different. But yeah, so in this case here, they're non-cognizing or non-realizing minds, and so yeah, they're none of these seven. And there are other ones as well. Remember, I mentioned tentative belief, or uh, just wondering. For instance, is sound impermanent without doubting it, but just wondering. So it's not a wavering mind, but it's just asking yourself, well, could it be impermanent? Yeah. So those are the types of minds that are not part of the seven. And the debate that arises as a result of, well, pointing out different types of consciousness that are not part of the seven, that are not included in these seven. Well, why these seven then? It's clear why six. It's clear why six, but you could also have eight altogether. Like the mind that wanders before you have doubt, you wonder is sound impermanent. Then doubt arises. Next is tentative belief, and then correct assumption. So how come these stages are left out? Likewise, why is the awareness to which the object appears, but it's not ascertained. In other words, the indeterminative mind or inattentive mind. Why are these minds? Why is that particular mind included in those seven? Okay, so that would be another debate. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, please.
So the meditative stabilization on the mind, on great compassion, would that be one? So it's written it's not a wrong consciousness, right? And
No.
does that mean that someone who would meditate, who has a great who has meditative stabilization, great compassion, does such a person need to have realized selflessness or emptiness or not
No.
necessarily?
None of these minds realize anything. None of these minds. I'm not sure I understood you correctly because it wasn't very loud. Maybe the microphone isn't working. I'm not sure. Anyway, so I think you said, don't these minds also realize emptiness?
Know whether it is necessary. Is it better now with this microphone?
Say again. Please say again.
I have a different microphone in my head, but I don't think it makes sense.
No, no, it's better.
Anyways,
It's better now. It's better now. Okay, go ahead.
um, I'm just wondering, like, since they are not wrong consciousnesses,
Mm-hmm.
whether you know, in order to not to be a wrong consciousness, whether there is a need for it to have a previous realization of selflessness or emptiness. But because it seems to me that, with having realized selflessness or emptiness, one
Mm-hmm.
would meditate in great compassion in a very different way. Maybe not, I don't know, but it's just like some assumption I have. So
That's true. No, that's true. But it doesn't mean you have to realize emptiness before great compassion. For instance, when we study the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras, Parchin, the implicit meaning of the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras, there's a lot of emphasis on practitioners of greater mental capacity or sharper mental faculty and those of weaker mental faculty. You may have heard that expression before. Um, so those of greater mental faculty, well, before they even bother, I mean, for lack of a better word, but before they even start to practice great compassion or cultivate great compassion in their continuum, they would wonder, well, is it possible to remove suffering? Because great compassion means you wish for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and its causes, and you wish yourself to help them overcome it. Now, before wishing for their suffering to be removed, the question that arises is can suffering be removed? Can suffering be removed? So, those of weaker mental capacity, they may not analyze that particular point, just go ahead. They have faith, they have faith, maybe even based on reasoning or blind faith. But anyway, so they don't follow reasoning to the same degree as someone of greater capacity. And so they just generate great compassion, generate the mind of enlightenment, and enter the Mahayana path, the path of the universal vehicle. But then there are those who always question, who basically feel, okay, so I need to know first, is the cessation of suffering possible? So how do they go about it? Well, first of all, they examine what is the main cause of suffering? What is the root cause of all our problems of samsara and so forth? Well, it's the mind that grasps our inherent existence. Now, from the Prasangika school point of view, or from the Sautrantika school point of view, they want to know what is the root cause. So in this case, it would be the view of grasping at an autonomous self. Either way, they now examine as the next step, having identified the root cause, can it be removed or not? How do you check whether it can be removed? By realizing emptiness, for instance. I mean, if you realize emptiness, if you realize the lack of inherent existence in the case of the Prasangika school, or in the case of the Sautrantika school, if you realize the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I, then you understand, oh, there's a valid cognition when it comes to selflessness. Therefore, the root misconception must be a wrong mind, must be a wrong consciousness, which means it can be removed. It has no basis in reality, it's not rooted in reality, it can be removed. So, based on that, they know firsthand from their own experience, from their own realization of emptiness, and not just it's not a direct realization. It doesn't need to be. It's a conceptual understanding of emptiness in the case of the Prasangika or selflessness in the case of the Sautrantika. So they know it can be removed, and based on that knowledge, they then feel much stronger about generating the mind of great compassion. They know it's possible. Well, first renunciation anyway, you have to generate renunciation first, then great compassion. And once you have great compassion, you move on to bodhicitta. Yeah, so what you're saying is true. The basis is much stronger. It's much more reliable. It's not just based on faith. But is it absolutely necessary? No. Is that clear? Okay. All right. Yeah. So anyway, these minds, therefore, are none of the seven. Uh, and cannot be considered wrong consciousnesses. They're not wrong conscious. No, no, sorry. They correct. They're not correct assumptions. Correct assumptions are also not correct. Oh no, moreover, they cannot be considered wrong consciousnesses. Sorry. If one defines a correctly assuming consciousness, it says, as one not arisen through the force of experience, which includes meditation, then these cannot be considered correctly assuming consciousnesses. Moreover, they cannot be considered wrong consciousnesses, for they're not mistaken with regard to their object of engagement, in that they are not defiled by the causes of error. Um, the thing is, they're just not this decisive. They're aspirational minds. They're aspirational in like I want to become enlightened. I want for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. Um, I want for all sentient beings, I want to help all sentient beings overcoming suffering in the case of great compassion. So they're not like these um, determinative kind of minds that are very decisive about their object of engagement, but rather they wish for something. They're kind of aspirational minds. Yeah. Okay, so these are the seven types of mind. I think that's no, these these are this is the correctly assuming consciousness as part of the seven cognitions. And then let's move to to inferential cognition. In science and philosophy, the explanation is very short. It's only a page and a half, which is so surprising. I would have thought like some of the other things are explained in so much detail. Why not explain inferential cognition in more detail? It's quite surprising. Since it plays such a huge part, and it's very fascinating, I think, especially for a lot of Westerners, even independent of those who not, I mean, those interested in Buddhism. Inferential cognition. So, inferential cognition may be explained by way of the following illustration. Take the case of someone who has generated within her mind stream a correct assumption, observing that sound is impermanent, as described above. When that person, out of a desire to know that sound is impermanent, engages in powerful analytical meditation through relying on mindfulness and meta awareness, introspection, the result is an inferential cognition. I like that the authors emphasize here it's not as easy as it may sometimes sound when you talk about understanding the three modes of a correct reason and then eventually coming to understand that which is to be established. It requires powerful analytical meditation, a strong degree or yeah, an intensity when it comes to concentration, in terms of time, spending a lot of time with this correct reason, relying on mindfulness, meta awareness. Why mention meta awareness? It's not so much about, yeah, well, you need meta awareness to some degree, but I think alertness should be mentioned here rather than introspection. But okay, whatever is the reason. So, of course, you need introspection as well to see whether you're distracted or not. So the point is, therefore, it takes time, it takes meditation to come to an inferential cognition. Furthermore, such an inference is grounded in perception, in direct perception. In its in its origins, it is grounded. I keep hearing some sound. Can you hear that sound? No?
Mhm. Passing in the mic here.
Ah, maybe it's the microphone. Yeah, it's kind of, and I keep thinking someone is saying something. So.
Mm.
Okay, so such an inference is grounded in perception. In its origins, it is grounded in perceptual auditory consciousness, here in this case, an ear consciousness, apprehending sound. Of course, first of all, we need to know what sound is in order to deal with this main kind of reason that's always given. Like sound is take sound, it is impermanent because because it's a product. That's the usual kind of reason, correct reason that is cited as an example. In its origins, it is grounded in such an ear consciousness, and in the end, it is grounded. Why grounded? Grounded kind of means that
Mm.
something has a stable foundation in something. So if it's grounded in a direct perception, a yogic direct perception, then that yogic direct perception is its foundation. It is rooted in that. But that's not what it says in Tibetan. It says that it leads to that. It means it leads to, in the end, it leads to a yogic direct perception, that the inferential cognition, that's just the first step. First, you have inferential cognition, then you familiarize further with that mind. You generate a union of calm abiding and special insight, conceptually realizing its object until eventually it turns into a direct perception, a yogic direct perception, which is why I would not say in the end it is grounded, but in the end it leads to a yogic direct perception, realizing, or it gives way to a yogic direct perception, realizing sound to be impermanent. It sounds as if yogic direct perception was its cause, but it's
Mm.
not. It's its result. Yes, please.
So what about if the subject is permanent?
Mhm.
Um is it yeah, I mean there is it also grounded in inference like first? Does it also start from a direct perception? Sorry, I was reading. So if the subject is permanent, does it also start with some kind of direct perception or not?
No, I mean, depending on, uh, I mean, what is possible, of course, you could directly understand that sound's impermanence, for instance. So that could be a yogic direct perception. First, take the subject sound's impermanence. It lacks inherent existence because it's dependently arisen, or it lacks true existence or whatever. You could use that which you've already realized directly. So sound's impermanence, of course, is impermanent, but then you could take the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. Take that as your subject, and then realize that this is permanent because it changes moment by it does. It's a phenomenon that doesn't change moment by moment. So, what would be your syllogism? It would be take the subject, the lack of an autonomous self. It's permanent because it's a phenomenon that changes, that doesn't change moment by moment. In that case, you had a yogic direct perception that already realized you could have already a direct yogic direct perception. You could have a yogic direct perception that has realized the lack of an autonomous self. And now, based on that, you kind of understand or you realize the different aspects of that correct syllogism and come to realize that this particular selflessness is permanent.
Okay.
But in the case of ordinary phenomena, so not selflessness, like not phenomena that are slightly hidden and permanent, for instance, unconditioned space, it wouldn't be a direct perception, but you would still depend on a direct perception. So the subject is not the object of a direct perception, unless you meditate on unconditioned space for a really long time and turn it into yogic direct perception. But who would do that? It's finally pointless. I mean, you could actually do that. You could do that with any phenomenon. In fact, once you become enlightened, you have yogic direct perceivers with regard to all phenomena. You could actually develop it not just for a hidden phenomenon, but also in order to realize something that is obvious. But again, it'll just be a waste of time.
Mhm.
But in the case of, for instance, uncompounded space or unconditioned space, you still depend on other sense consciousnesses. I mean, you need to understand what impermanent space means. You need to understand what could obstruct something, or what does it mean to be non-obstructive. So looking around, for instance, the unconditioned space in my cup. As an example, I need to know the cup, I need to know the inside, the hollow inside of my cup, and so forth. In that sense, in the end, and this is something that you discuss also like in the Pramanavartika, whatever understanding you have, being conceptual in terms of like, well, the subject is only conceptually known, the reason is only conceptually known, and so forth. However, it goes back. At some point in the past, there must have been a direct perception, because otherwise that permanent phenomenon could have not been fully understood. Yeah.
Yeah.
But here in this case, they use just sound, and so most straightforward is that your consciousness that realizes sound as the subject. And I read your message, Anastasia. So I'm going to go through all the different aspects. I'll do that. I'm not sure today because inferential cognition will take a little longer, I guess, than the other minds.
Mhm.
So either today or tomorrow, I'll go through the different aspects of a correct reason. Okay, so the definition given here is a construing awareness. Again, I would say a conceiving or conception that through dependent on its basis, a correct reason is non-deceptive. Okay, I mean, non-deceptive is not wrong in terms of the translation. It has that meaning in other contexts, as I said before, but it's misleading because it takes you to um, like mistaken, non-mistaken, and yeah, it can be misunderstood. I prefer incontrovertible, which is just stronger. It's more decisive. It points more to this decisive nature of that mind, realizing its object. Anyway, so it's incontrovertible regarding its object of comprehension. This is supported by Compendium of Valid Cognition, Pramana Samuccaya by Dignaga. An inference for one's own sake is this: perceiving the object via a tri-model reason. The three modes. Okay, tri-model. Okay. When one infers the thesis from seeing the reason and remembering the relation, that is called inferential cognition. Oh, so that's a very simplified version. There's a lot more to it. Maybe it's a good time to explain it now. Oh, I have a hard time with this because I'm really not used to explaining this in English. But to put it in simple terms, I mean, without giving you all the definitions, because that gets too complicated. But there's an easy way to say it. Okay, first of all, tunjok. What is tunjok? A harmonious factor? Ooh. How do you call that? Harmonious factor? Hmm. Factor of a
Accord-
similar class?
Concordant class. Concordant
Pardon?
class. The
Say again?
concordant. Oh, here we call it the heterogeneous,
Homologous.
and heterogeneous case.
Oh my God.
I know,
Could it be any easier?
but we can
Okay.
use concordant and discordant class.
Yeah, let's lose that. I mean, it's just such a tongue breaker. So concordant and discordant class. Okay, concordant and discordant class. Okay, so first of all, before you can actually come to understand that which is to be established, let's stick with sound as impermanent. There's a lot of work you need to do beforehand, a lot of understanding, and all of that really makes sense. First of all, you need to understand each aspect, each of the three aspects. What is the subject? Understand sound, understand impermanent, understand product. Now, when it comes to impermanent, a very popular debate in this case is, well, since it is a slightly hidden phenomenon, the question is, has the person who aims towards, wishes to realize that sound is impermanent, have they already realized subtle impermanence before? Have they or have they not? If they have already realized, there's no issue. They already know impermanent. They know product, they know impermanent, they know sound. However, in the case of someone who now for the first time realizes subtle impermanence on the basis of sound, well, in as part of their preparatory work to prepare uh, for the inferential cognition. So this is just the preparation work. The goal is, or the actual activity we're looking at is the inferential cognition of sound being impermanent. So in preparation for that, in order to come to that point, there's certain understanding you must reach, certain understandings you must develop. And impermanence is one of them. But here in this case of the person not having previously realized impermanence and realizing impermanence newly once the inferential cognition has been developed. Therefore, the kind of impermanence they realize when they understand the three parts of the syllogism is coarse impermanence. That's sufficient. Okay, it's just coarse impermanence. So, what is coarse impermanence? Anyone knows what coarse impermanence means?
The one that
That would be something that is visibly uh, something that changes from that you can see changes. For
Right.
example, yeah.
Yes, for example, give me an example. Yeah, it's easier with the example.
For example, an apple gets rotten over time.
Right. An apple getting rotten, or you're blowing out a matchstick. You've got a burning matchstick, you blow it out. One moment there is the flame, the next moment it's gone. So something that even with your eye consciousness you become aware of because it's such a coarse change. Okay. So a very obvious kind of change. You can realize that, you can understand that. For instance, now you could understand it for example on the basis of melonangi chejin gusunye no. Karsa. What is the Dutch mit Benna? Uh, what is the tuncho? What is the example that's usually given in the case of sound is permanent? Dutch mit Benna?
what?
Melonangi chejin gusunye
What is that? In the
Pardon?
accepting, in the
Pardon?
proof that it's impermanence.
In the proof of impermanence, sound is impermanent because it's a product. There's like always, and I can't believe I forget it now. What comes to mind is the perception. Karsa, Kejitama machine. Karsa, kare Kejitama. Last moment of the last moment
Hey, that's one
Flame of
thing.
the last moment.
flame. Medo Kejitama. Mare. I can't think of the Tibetan right now, but never mind. Yeah, so the last moment of a candle flame. Yeah, that's the reason that's the example that's usually given. Now, okay, so you've already now you've understood the three aspects. First of all, sound, impermanent, coarse impermanence, and product. So how do you understand coarse impermanence? Well, on the basis of this example, the example of the last moment of a candle flame. Okay. So then the next step is now you need to look at the three modes. The three modes being, well, first of all, you're someone interested in understanding that sound is impermanence, and you must understand the presence of the reason in the subject. In other words, sound is a product. It's as simple as that. So without making it complicated, you need to understand that sound is a product. Okay, that is part of the first mode, or part of the presence of the subject, presence of the sign in the subject, the reason in the subject. All right, that's kind of less complicated. However, more complicated, or what's more complicated, are the latter two modes, which are the forward pervasion and the reverse with a counter pervasion, whichever you want to call it. For that, you basically need to realize, of course, the pervasion, for instance, whatever is a product, is necessarily impermanent. But before you can realize, or in order to realize that, you need again an example. Same example as before, that on the basis of which you understood product. So understanding on the basis of that last moment of the candle flame, you understand product and you understand impermanent, these two aspects. But now you also want to understand the pervasion. You want to understand that whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent. And you want to eventually realize that on the basis of sound. But once you realize that on the basis of sound, you have an inferential cognition of the impermanence of sound. Therefore, first understand that pervasion on the basis of, again, the candle flame. And to understand that, there's a lot of other perceptions that need to precede that. In order to understand that pervasion, you need to understand, for instance, that permanent and impermanent are direct opposites. Permanent and impermanent are direct opposites. Okay, whatever is impermanent is necessarily not permanent, and the other way around. So direct opposites also in the sense you understand if if you understand one thing, or if something is impermanent, or when you realize impermanence, then you likewise negate permanence. So that kind of relation that permanence and impermanence have. This you must know. You also have to know, um, I don't want to make it too complicated. I'm not going to bring in everything because that makes it complicated. But you have to, for instance, know that there is a common locus. There is something both a product and impermanent. And you have to know that there's nothing that is a product and permanent. That understanding, you need to develop that understanding. So there's nothing that is permanent and a product, and there's something that is impermanent and a product. So you see, these are kind of the most important things you need to know. Now, as to their order, we could debate that, but that's not the point here. It has to logically make sense why you need to understand that. I mean, obviously, if you want to understand that there's nothing that is a product and permanent, but there's something that is a product that is impermanent, of course, you need to know the relationship between permanent and impermanent. In other words, understand that they're direct opposites. Also, what you need to understand is the relation between product and impermanent. What is their relation? What is that connection? So they're one nature. They're one nature because they're synonymous. The synonyms, impermanent and product. So that relationship, without that relationship, again, you can't establish the pervasion. So these are all the understandings you need to have. So just basically, there's a little more, but never mind that. So,
Hey, Geshma,
yes, please.
you just mentioned that product and impermanent are synonymous. Is that correct? Or
Well, I mean, if you look it up in the dictionary, they wouldn't say they're synonymous. Um, but I don't know which word you use, equivalent or synonymous. So, synonymous in the sense that the eight doors of equivalence are, or the eight doors of being synonyms, they are fulfilled. Whatever is impermanent is a product, whatever is a product. Yeah. So in that way, synonymous.
Okay.
So having established all this, their relationship and so on. Now, really what you need to understand, and I'm not going to go into the definition here because it's like I can't even say it in English properly. About the discordant class and the concordant class. It's just a complicated way of saying, well, you understand that product, whatever is so product and impermanent, there's that there is something that is impermanent and a product, and there's nothing that is a product and not permanent. And based on that, and again, or grounded in that, you then realize on the basis of the last moment of the candle flame that whatever is a product must be necessarily impermanent. And then on the basis of something permanent, such as unconditioned space, we realize that whatever is permanent is necessarily not a product. Right? The pervasion, when you spell out the pervasion, so whatever is impermanent, whatever is a product must be impermanent. And then you switch it around, whatever is permanent cannot be a product. So these two pervasions have to be understood on the basis of two kinds of examples, a concordant example and a discordant example. And having done that, so let's now summarize after everything that I've said so far. It's probably easiest if you see it written down. Then it kind of makes sense. Yeah, you need to understand all that because otherwise you never bring the three modes together. So you bring the three modes together with one mind. Sound is product. Whatever is a product must be impermanent. Whatever is permanent cannot be a product on the basis of these examples that I mentioned earlier. So having understood all this, then before long, you come to the understanding, therefore sound must be impermanent. You realize sound is impermanent. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So you can use, of course, easier examples. I mean, examples that we're more familiar with, for instance, the fire billing, the smoke billowing out of your neighbor's house, smoke and fire. Yeah, so the existence of fire in your neighbor's house because there's smoke and so forth. Maybe that's a little easier, more straightforward, less abstract, but the idea is the same. It works the same way. That's what you need in order to generate, in order to develop a correct an inferential cognition or an inference. Yes. Okay. Now, having said all this, is this enough? Are there no questions left on that, Anastasia?
I think what I wonder is like, how does one know for sure that it is not like that there it's not like a wrong sign with remainder, and how to go that to then establishing a correct sign? Like,
So you
um,
mean, okay, Hachigi. Oh, Hachigi. So I mean, what could give rise to that incorrect sign of or yeah, wrong sign of a remainder? I mean, how, in what way? Because there's no way. I mean, you've established that there's nothing that is permanent and a product. There is something that is impermanent and a product. So in what way could that give rise? What makes you doubt that you could still have
that
that
may
doubt about that kind of reason?
um like that. So how do I know that there is actually nothing in the discordant class, and it's not just me not having seen it yet, or not having, maybe I lack some understanding, or like how can I be certain?
Well, by understanding product and permanent. A product, what does a product mean? A product means that a phenomenon has arisen from its substantial cause, which has transformed into that phenomenon. So let's take sound. Take sound. Sound is the result of its substantial cause, which is a former moment of sound. And this sound came into existence. Okay, some say that sound doesn't have a substantial cause. I don't agree. I don't agree with that. And the text doesn't seem to agree either. So sound has arisen from its own substantial cause, a former moment of sound, and that former moment was able to transform into the present moment through the help of cooperative conditions. If it wasn't for cooperative conditions such as oxygen, um, whatever, if it's sound coming from a person's vocal cord, so it's the vocal cord and so forth. And so there is a change. I mean, without that change, you couldn't have a product. Therefore, if something is a product, how could there be something, could something be a product of causes and cooperative conditions, which is the meaning of being a product, and at the same time not be changing? You see what I'm saying? It's just logically impossible. You don't need to know all permanent phenomena just to know that this is just not possible. How could you have something that is a product that has only arisen because of the changes of the causes and the cooperative or the substantial cause and the cooperative conditions and still doubt that it's not changing? By understanding product, you understand that there's nothing, or you can come to understand, I mean, fully understand product, you can come to understand that product is something that comes through change, and thus there's nothing that is non-changing and a product. Does that
So
make sense?
yeah, actually. So it doesn't matter actually at all, it's not about seeing many things or something like that. It's more about really understanding the sign and the predicate and what
Yes,
nature of the sign. Yeah.
absolutely. Oh my God, it'd be like you'd be like going on forever. Every permanent phenomenon, the absence of Donald Trump on my table, the absence of donkey on my table, the absence of this on my table. It's like be like endless. You'd never come to a conclusion. You don't need that. You just need to understand exactly what does product mean? What does permanent mean? So it seems it's a little misleading when we hear whatever is A is necessarily B. Whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent. Oh, so you have to bring every product and check its impermanent, whether it's impermanent or not. That's not what this is, what this means. As obvious from the definition, it's understanding product and understanding there's nothing that cannot be a product that is at the same time permanent, because that contradicts the whole nature of being a product. Yeah,
Geshe,
Gonzalo. Mhm.
that's what's called ascertaining a relation, right?
Well, it's part of it. That's not all of it. Um, Ascertaining the relation is also if you have one, you have the other as well, and they are connected. They're not disconnected. Um, I mean, there are certain examples, and I don't want to go into it, that even though if you have one, you have the other. There's no necessarily a relation. That doesn't have to be a relation. So let's say if there's something permanent, there's also something impermanent, but that doesn't mean the existence of permanence is related to the existence of impermanence. You see what I'm saying? So there's a little more to it. There's a little bit more to the relation, but yeah, but it's strongly connected. It's strongly connected. Yes.
But I mean, in order for something to be a correct sign, it has to be related to the predicate, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I said. You have to realize the relation between product and impermanent. For
Mm.
instance, understanding that they're synonymous in this
Right,
case. Yeah,
right.
yeah, absolutely. Yes, you have to realize that. Hmm.
Ascertaining the relation, is
Yeah.
it done? Do you have to ascertain the relationship by inference? Do you have to have another inference to ascertain the relation? Or is it done in a different way?
No, I think because here it's acceptable to use coarse impermanence, right? You can use coarse impermanence. If it were subtle impermanence, yes, well then it's a slightly hidden phenomenon, and their relation would also be slightly hidden. But in the case of here, it's the object to be established, or the object, the predicate, which is impermanent, which refers to impermanence, right? They
Mm.
keep saying the predicate impermanence, which is the predicate, which by implication refers to not subtle impermanence, but coarse impermanence. So in this case, you don't need an inferential. No, you don't need an inferential cognition. I mean, the thing is like, okay, that's a whole different debate. Okay, so you come to realize it. There's a valid cognition. Is it direct perception or is it, that's a whole different, uh, right? Like, I mean, especially when it comes to these objects that are not sense objects. Although on the
Mm.
other hand, you could argue, well, there are sense objects. You can know, uh, the productness of a phenomenon if you watch a seed and a sprout for long enough, or
Mhm.
it could be smoke and fire. You realize that their causal relationship.
Mm.
So you realize that smoke is the result of fire, or you realize that there's a change taking place, so a course kind of impermanence. So you could say, yes, you realize that on the basis, first of all, you can realize product and impermanent with us with a sense consciousness. It's not explicitly known, but implicitly you can know that they're cause and effect with an eye consciousness, with a continuum of eye consciousness.
I
And
see.
then their relationship, that they're connected, is that an eye consciousness? Is that um that becomes a whole different debate, right? And
See.
different people would say different things. But yes, without even going into that debate, I'd say, okay, yes, you need to know their relationship. You need to realize that relationship.
Right, in order to have inference, like that's a necessary step.
And you don't need to have an inference. Yeah, that was the answer to your question. You don't need
Mm.
to have an inferential understanding. It's
In
not like
order-
that you inferentially need to realize the relation.
I see, not necessarily or never. Like there's some relationships and some others.
Yeah, you may have to, yeah. especially when it comes to hidden phenomena like emptiness, for example. So to realize the relation between dependent arising and emptiness, yeah, I think especially in the Prasangika school, then you would have to know the relationship through inference. I mean, how would you otherwise know the relationship between dependent origination
Right,
and lack of inherent existence? Yes.
right.
So
But I
you
have
don't have to do it for all cases, but yeah. Mhm.
I kind of have the feeling that because if you have to realize that by inference, you need another sign, and then that sign has to be related to that predicate, and then to realize
Yeah.
that inference, you need another sign.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah. And then you end up with an infinite regress. Yes.
so, like that's why I guess at least some relations should be
Mm,
like
yeah,
able to be
obvious.
realized by direct perception.
Exactly. This is why it's such a big problem. This is where it gets really complicated. Like, how do you realize the relation? What do you need to realize? If you don't have a self-knower, sometimes there's like the self-knower gets involved, that at least there are different phenomena and so forth. It gets really, really complicated. But yes, um, to know the relation, yeah, you don't always require. In some cases you may, but not always.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
Okay. All right. Having said that, having explained that part, so let's now go back to the text. An inference for one's own sake. Oh no, when one infers the thesis from seeing the reason. So that's the first mode, and remembering the relation. That is called inferential cognition. Yeah, that was that was a summarized version of what I just went through. When categorized in terms of the object of comprehension that is validly known, there are three types of inferential cognition. Here, I really like the terminology. The translators did a great job. Inferential cognition based on empirical fact. That's so much better than through the power of the fact, which is a literal translation from the Tibetan. No, an empirical fact. That's really good. Inferential cognition based on popular convention. Again, that's a good translation instead of renown. And inferential cognition based on trustworthy testimony instead of belief. That's the literal translations are in mind in Tibetan Buddhism, but these ones I prefer. These translations I prefer. The definition of inferential cognition based on empirical fact is a conception or construing awareness or conception. Although in this case, construing is fine because it's an understanding mind, but the Tibetan word actually means conceiving. So conception that through depending on correct evidence, a correct reason, a correct sign, or correct evidence based on empirical fact is non-deceptive or incontrovertible regarding its object of comprehension, a slightly hidden phenomenon, a slightly hidden object. An example is an inferential cognition realizing that sound is impermanent because of being produced. All right. That is explained in Dharmakirti's exposition of valid cognition. It is stated that with respect to its own object, an inferential cognition does not rely on scripture. I mean, it does indirectly, surely someone explaining to you what impermanence means and so forth, but it just directly relies on reasoning, logical reasoning. This states that an inferential cognition based on empirical fact does not rely on scriptural testimony. Yeah, that's good news. I mean, the things we need to know to become fully enlightened are all empirical. I mean, they're all slightly hidden. That's the good thing. There are examples of the subtle working of karma. Well, it's to be debated, of course. Can you really fully understand that on the basis or certain events of karma? Can you really understand them on the basis of this third type of reason here? But the point is, you don't need to. What you really need to understand, it's all slightly hidden. All phenomena that you need to realize in order to become liberated or enlightened are slightly hidden. Does anyone disagree? No? Okay. If you do, please say so. All right. So this states that an inferential cognition based on empirical fact does not rely on scriptural testimony. So not rely on scriptures. The definition of inferential cognition based on popular convention is, again, a conception that through depending on correct evidence or correct reason based on popular convention is incontrovertible regarding its object of comprehension, a language-based popular convention. For example, an inferential cognition, realizing that the word moon can be used to refer to the rabbit bearer. Rabbit possessor. Can you see the rabbit in the moon?
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Oh, I have to show you the rabbit. I'll show you a picture later on. There's actually like online, you find a picture with the outlines of the rabbit around, and then you can see if you now I cannot see anything but the rabbit. When I was little, there was the man in the moon, so I grew up with that. And then I came to learn about Buddhism, and I no longer see the rabbit, no longer see the man in the moon. I only see the rabbit. Um, so okay, here, what is this reason? It is well, this is beautifully explained in Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. You've got the whole reason there. Let's just finish this part. Mm, okay, so rabbit possessor, of course, is a popular kind of name of the moon in ancient India, epithet of the moon in ancient India. Then again, exposition of valid cognition says with regard to that kind of reason, therefore, inferential cognition based on empirical fact has a different object from that based on popular convention. Yeah, obviously. Then the definition of inferential cognition based on trustworthy testimony is a conception that through depending on correct evidence, correct reason, based on trustworthy testimony, is non-deceptive regarding its object of comprehension, a very hidden phenomenon. An example is an inferential cognition that realizes its object of comprehension, a very hidden object, independence on its reason, a scripture that has passed the threefold analysis. And again, from the exposition of valid cognition, because trustworthy statements are generally non-deceptive, cognition from those statements is considered to be inferential. All right. Doesn't really give much. I'm so surprised that there's so little information on inferential cognition.
Geshama,
Yes.
what is the generally here refuting or like negating?
Generally.
It's like says definitely not
Sorry, I
deceptive.
can't hear. Say again, please.
It says that by the third type of inference is generally so
Where do you see generally?
In
Oh,
the
generally, because trustworthy statements are generally non-deceptive.
I think like there are some that are deceptive.
Yeah, actually, they're not generally. I mean, it's it doesn't imply that there's some that are non-deceptive, that the none that are deceptive. I don't think so. It's not even referring to, let me just look it up in Tibetan. They're not even referring to interpretative teachings because they're said to be non-deceptive. Tēnā Jesu papale, tāpatari mare. Yeshe tsingni milowe, chile Jesu papaini. Ha, yiche tsingni milowe, chile Jesu papani. I wonder whether that's translated correctly. Yiche tsingni milowe, chile Jesu papani. Milowe, chile Jesu. I have to think about it. I'm not sure this is. I have to look about. I'll look through this at home or later when I'm after class. I look at this particular statement again, and I go back to the commentary by Getzabje, and I'll let you know tomorrow if that's okay.
And
Chile.
also
Yes. The general, yeah, you're right. I didn't even pay attention to that. Yes. Generally non-deceptive. Go ahead. Yes.
I did also have a question about what you're saying about everything you need to attain Buddhahood is slightly hidden. So knowing that Buddhas exist is a slightly hidden phenomena.
Knowing that, yes, knowing that Buddhahood is a slightly hidden phenomenon, like even Buddhahood. So it's more about the enlightened mind as possible, to understand the enlightened mind, understanding that enlightenment is possible. Yeah, that's a slightly hidden phenomenon. Yeah. Good news. Yes, you would say understanding that enlightenment is possible. Yeah, no need to say more. Yeah, okay. All right, let's look at, I have a little bit more time, not really, but I'll just take the time a little bit. Inferential cognition. This is beautiful here in Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. I think it's really well explained. Where is it? Okay, just a sec. That's on page 75. Okay, let's read just the beginning part and then I'll finish for today. Inferential cognizer. So the definition of an inferential cognizer, again, a determinative or conception, conceiving awareness, which, depending on its basis, a correct sign is incontrovertible with regard to its object of comprehension of hidden phenomenon. Slightly hidden phenomenon. Yeah, slightly hidden. Schon so korkuyor. The Sautrantikas following reasoning, Chittamatrans and Svatantrika Madhyamika assert that all inferential cognizers must be produced in dependence on a basis that is a correct sign. Oh, this is interesting. It brings in the Prasangika school, which, yeah, I said before, like oftentimes that's done. Within Prasangika, some textbooks say that this is not necessarily the case. But although those of dull faculties can generate an inference only in dependence on a correct sign, those of sharpest faculties can generate one merely in dependence on a consequence. Okay, so that's one view. It's only for those of dull faculties that they need a correct sign. Then other textbooks on Prasangika, which say that an inferential cognizer can only be produced in dependence on a correct sign, respond that while it's not necessary explicitly to state a correct reason to a practitioner of sharpest faculties, that person would think one out for himself, and thus his inferential cognition or inferential consciousness is produced in dependence on a correct sign. So if you have a wrong view, or well, not just a wrong view, you actually have a correct assumption, but you haven't realized that sound is impermanent, for instance. So you have a correct assumption with regard to sound's impermanence, but you haven't realized it yet, then certain consequences will be by another person if you realize it for the first time. So another person presents consequences to you, and on the basis of that, you yourself then, for instance, if you were to say it follows that sound is not a product because it's permanent, then you change that around to, so it follows, sorry, it's sound, it follows it's not a product because it's permanent. Well, you can change it around for yourself and change it to a correct sign. And in that way, yes, there is a correct sign involved, but the main logical kind of statement that you relied on, or the main logical reasoning that you relied on, was that logical consequence, or even more than one consequence, could be consequences. Okay, that's the Prasangika school, so it's so different to the other schools. Okay, so the meaning of correct sign is discussed extensively in the study of science and reasoning. However, in brief, correct sign means correct reason, correct reasoning, or correct proof, correct evidence. Those are all synonymous. A mind which realizes its object of comprehension in dependence on such is called an inferential cognizer. Okay, that should do for today. Okay, so yeah. So for tomorrow, oh yes, please read page 676 if you can, all the way to page 84. It's a lot, but just read as much as you can. I'm not even sure we'll finish tomorrow. So tomorrow's Tuesday, Wednesday. So even if we need 2 days, but yeah, so up to Friday, until Friday, I think we'll finish the 7 types of minds. Then I'll be traveling. I'll be traveling to Germany. So for 3 days we won't have class, but then we'll have 7 classes on mind and mental factors. That'll be enough to cover this important subject. Okay, great. I just keep making the plan to be sure I don't run out of time.
Just a request, if we could just review the threefold analysis too, with regards to the trustworthy testimony inference, if you
Yeah,
want.
we'll do that. We'll do that. We'll do it in here, Mind in Tibetan Buddhism. But honestly, this is so, for me, it's so dissatisfactory because I just don't believe that this is possible. And we debated it and debated it and debated it, but I've never really felt this was actually possible, that you can understand something so hidden on the basis of that general statement even. But yes, I'll, of course, absolutely go through these 3.
Thank
Yeah. Okay.
Dedication. Having thoroughly investigated in accord with all that I have heard day and night through the four reasonings, mind born of reflection on these topics of contemplation, may this discernment sever all doubts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.